So if you think modern politics are toxic, imagine a world where theologians excommunicate each other before a meeting even starts,
Oh, yeah.
right? Or an emperor who has to use a metal stencil just because he cannot write his own name.
Literally tracing it out.
Exactly. And a pope who literally starves his predecessor to death just to get the top job. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are doing exactly that. We are unpacking a dense but honestly wildly dramatic set of church history notes.
And we are covering a very specific, chaotic window from 431 to 681 AD.
Yeah, and our mission today is to extract the incredible true story of how modern Christianity was actually forged. And spoiler alert, it's not a peaceful story.
Not at all. I mean, we always picture these quiet, pious monks, sitting in candlelit rooms, peacefully copying manuscripts.
Right, just minding their own business.
Exactly. But the source material paints a completely different picture. It is this saga of violent councils, barbarian invasions, and these massive papal power plays.
It is basically a political thriller. So to set the stage for you, we have to look at the map of the Roman Empire at this time. It is fracturing.
It is practically splitting right down the middle. In the east, over in Constantinople, things are still relatively wealthy. The government is functioning.
But they are arguing.
Oh, constantly. The emperors and patriarchs are locked in these incredibly high-stakes debates about the very nature of Jesus.
While in the west, over in Rome, the empire is literally falling apart. I mean, it is physically collapsing under the weight of barbarian invasions.
Yeah, you have intellectual warfare in the east and literal physical warfare in the west.
Which brings us to our first major theme, the Great Christological Smackdown. This is where foundational theological disputes basically threaten to tear the early church apart.
And it all starts with a massive clash between two dominant schools of thought. You have Antioch and you have Alexandria.
And the core debate here, according to our sources, is a question that seems pretty simple on the surface. Who is Christ?
Right. And representing the school of Antioch, you have a guy named Nestorius. So in 428 AD, he becomes the Patriarch of Constantinople.
A huge promotion.
Huge. And Nestorius looks at the popular religious devotion of the time, specifically how people are calling Mary Theotokos.
Which translates to God-bearer or Mother of God, right?
Exactly. And Nestorius pushes back hard on this. He says, no, we cannot say that. He prefers the term Christotokos, meaning Mother of Christ.
Because for the Antioch school, they wanted to strictly separate the human and the divine.
Yes, they had to protect God's divinity. Nestorius argued that Mary, since she was a human woman, could not possibly give birth to God the Creator. She only gave birth to the human Jesus.
Okay, so this implies separating Christ into two completely distinct persons.
Right. It is a word-man Christology. The human and the divine are two totally separate realities.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because it feels like Antioch and Alexandria are basically two competing tech companies.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like they're trying to write the operating system for Christianity. Antioch looks at it and says, we have to separate the code into two distinct apps, the human app and the divine app.
Yes, and they might run on the same device, but they absolutely do not mix.
Right. But then you have St. Cyril of Alexandria.
And he is furious about this two-app system.
Oh, he hates it.
Alexandria insisted on a word-flesh Christology. Cyril argues it is all one seamlessly integrated program. Christ is one person, the Word made flesh, in what they called a hypostatic union.
Right. So you cannot divide the actions. If Jesus is crying, God is crying.
Exactly. And Cyril goes on the offensive. He writes these 12 anathemas against Nestorius.
Which are basically a list of severe theological condemnations.
Yeah.
But I have a question here. Why was the title of Mary the breaking point for all of this?
Well, for these thinkers, if you get the nature of Christ wrong, you get salvation entirely wrong.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if the divine did not truly unite with human flesh down to the literal molecular level, then human flesh is not actually redeemed.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But there's also a massive political angle here.
Oh, completely. Cyril was definitely using this theology as a political move to exert Alexandria's seniority over Antioch, and especially over the new upstart capital of Constantinople.
And all this tension just explodes at the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD.
It is total chaos. Cyril arrives early, sets himself up as president of the council, and unilaterally excommunicates Nestorius.
Before John of Antioch and the opposing party even arrive.
Yes. And when John finally gets there 4 days later, his faction is so mad that they form their own separate council right down the street.
You cannot make this up.
And they excommunicate Cyril's side in retaliation.
So it is just a giant standoff until the Pope's legates finally arrive from Rome They back Cyril, and Nestorius is banished to Egypt.
But as our sources show, banishing one guy does not fix the underlying problem. It actually causes a massive overcorrection.
Right, and this leads us directly into our second section, the Robber Council and the eventual triumph of Chalcedon.
So, because Alexandria won so decisively, this new theology emerges called monophysitism. It is championed by a guy named Eutyches.
And if Nestorius separated Christ's natures too much, Eutyches basically merges them way too much.
Exactly. He taught that Christ's human nature was completely absorbed into the divine nature.
The analogy they used at the time was like a single drop of honey dissolved into the ocean, resulting in just one nature.
Which sounds very poetic.
It does.
But it triggered absolute violence on the ground. And this is where we have to ask, how did intellectual debates devolve into actual physical violence?
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit shocking. In 449 AD, Eutyches and the Emperor Theodosius convened the Robber Council of Ephesus.
Presided over by Dioscorus.
Yes, and it erupts into literal physical violence on the council floor. Bishop Flavian of Constantinople tries to oppose this monophysite idea.
And he is badly assaulted by monks and soldiers. He actually dies soon after from his injuries.
I mean, these are the founding fathers of church doctrine, literally beating a bishop to death over the definition of nature versus person.
It is horrifying.
It really is. Pope Leo in Rome had sent this highly detailed document called Leo's Tome to condemn Eutyches, but Dioscorus just ignores it. How did regular believers even survive this whiplash?
It definitely raises huge questions about human frailty versus institutional survival, but it sets up the necessary correction. In 451 AD, the emperor dies, which allows a new council to be formed.
The First Council of Chalcedon.
Exactly. And this time, Pope Leo's tome is finally read out loud.
And the bishops literally cry out, "Peter has spoken through Leo."
And the Creed of Chalcedon establishes the ultimate orthodox rule. Christ has two natures without confusion, change, division, or separation, all existing in one person.
Which destroys monophysitism, because as you pointed out in the notes, if his human nature was absorbed, how could he experience human suffering or death?
Exactly. It was a necessary correction to keep the religion relatable to the human experience.
Okay, so while the East is arguing over Greek vocabulary and beating each other up in councils, the West is dealing with a very different reality.
Yeah, the West is physically collapsing.
Which brings us to the fall of the West and the barbarian kings. Let's look at the timeline from the sources. In 410 AD, the Visigoth leader Alaric actually sacks Rome.
A completely devastating psychological blow to the ancient world.
And the Emperor Honorius is so overwhelmed that he basically tells the people in Britain, "You are on your own, defend yourselves."
Ending Roman rule in Britain just like that.
Just cut them off. And Britain then starts dealing with its own unique theological issue, the Pelagian heresy.
Right, pioneered by a British monk. And this is the idea that you can win salvation entirely through your own human efforts.
Like pulling yourself up by your spiritual bootstraps, which clashed heavily with St. Augustine of Hippo, who insisted on the need for divine grace.
So Pope Celestine sends St. Germanus in 429 to help combat this heresy.
But Germanus ends up doing way more than just preaching, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. He actually helps the Britons organize military defenses against Saxon raiders.
The church is literally stepping in to do the state's job. And we see this again in 452 AD when Attila the Hun reaches Rome.
Right. The Emperor Valentinian III is desperate, so he sends Pope Leofrisil out to meet Attila.
And miraculously, Attila turns back and actually dies the next year.
It is incredible.
It is. I mean, comparing it to today, it is like a modern-day hostage negotiator walking into an army camp completely unarmed and somehow talking the world's most feared warlord into just going home.
It really highlights the shifting power dynamics, because by 476 AD, we get the official fall of the West. The last emperor, Romulus Augustus, abdicates to Odoacer.
The Roman emperor is just gone.
Gone. Which means the Pope and the Church had to step in as the de facto civic leaders and defenders of the people.
And that fundamentally changes the role of the papacy forever, especially with the rise of the Franks. In 486, Clovis defeats the last Roman holdout in Gaul.
And this is huge because most of the Germanic tribes at the time were Arian Christians. But Clovis marries a Catholic, and he converts around 496, which brings large-scale Catholic conversions to his entire kingdom.
So you have this growing Catholic power base in the West, but they are surrounded by Arian kings, which sets us up for our fourth section, the massive power struggle between Rome and Constantinople.
the growing rift between the Pope in the West and the Emperor in the East.
And we are impartially reporting the sources here, but the tension is palpable. The sources detail the Acacian Schism from 484 to 519 AD.
A 35-year break in communion between Rome and Constantinople.
Over lingering monophysitism in the East. And the letters from this period are just amazing. Pope Gelasius writes to Emperor Anastasius I, asserting that in sacraments, the emperor must be obedient to ecclesiastical authority.
Basically saying God desired priests to be preeminent over everyone.
And Anastasius claps back a few years later to Pope Hormisdas in 517. He literally writes, "You may thwart me, reverend sir, you may insult me, but you may not command me."
The ancient trash talk is just epic.
It really is.
Yeah.
But what does this all mean for the average person? I mean, you have an Arian king in Italy, a monophysite-leaning emperor in the East, and a Catholic pope caught in the middle. Was this even about theology anymore, or just raw geopolitics?
Honestly, theology was geopolitics. Let's look at Theodoric the Goth. He is sent to replace Odoacer, and he literally kills him with his own sword at a peace negotiation.
Yikes.
Yeah. And Theodoric is an Arian ruling from Ravenna. He has so little education, he uses a stencil to sign his name, but he is politically very sharp.
Yeah, and very paranoid.
Extremely, because he knew high-ranking Catholics in his territory had their ultimate religious loyalty tied to the Eastern Emperor.
Which made them severe political liabilities.
Exactly. And that is why in 524 he executes his own head of government, the Catholic philosopher Boethius, just for consorting with Constantinople.
Having the wrong theology could literally get you killed. Which brings us to the climax of all this political intrigue. Section 5. Justinian, Theodora, and papal murder.
This is where the Eastern Empire attempts to reconquer the West, and it gets incredibly dark.
It really does. So in the East, Emperor Justin I, who is Catholic, starts persecuting Arians.
And Theodoric, being an Arian in the West, is enraged by this. So he forces Pope John I to travel all the way to Constantinople to demand that Justin stop.
Just imagine that road trip. And when Pope John gets there, he gets a hero's welcome. He's even seated higher than the patriarch.
Justin agrees to return some churches, but he refuses to let forced converts return to Arianism.
So Theodoric furiously blames Pope John when he gets back. He throws him in prison, and the Pope dies a few days later in 526.
A literal martyr to the politics of the era. But then Justinian takes over in 527.
And Justinian wants to reconquer Italy. But there's a twist. His wife, Empress Theodora, is a monophysite, and she has a massive amount of influence over him.
Oh, she is heavily involved. So when Pope Agapitus travels to Constantinople, he unmasks Theodora's favorite patriarch as a monophysite.
And gets Justinian to depose him.
Which makes Theodora furious.
So she hatches this dark finale of a plot. She promises a man named Vigilius the papacy if you will just support monophysitism.
Vigilius agrees. He rushes back to Rome. But when he gets there, he finds out Silverius has already been elected pope.
And this is happening right as the Byzantine general Belisarius is besieging Rome. It is total chaos.
Right. The army enters through the Porta Asinaria, and in the middle of this confusion, Vigilius makes his move.
He gets Silverius deposed on fake treason charges. Vigilius becomes pope, and Silverius is effectively starved to death under Vigilius's watch.
It is unbelievable.
It is mind-blown territory. It is like a season finale of a premium cable drama, except it is the actual history of the papacy. He literally starves his rival to death to become pope. How does the institution even recover from that?
It is a massive irony. I mean, the church spent a century trying to perfectly define the divine and sinless nature of Christ at Chalcedon.
Right.
And meanwhile, its highest earthly representatives are engaging in blackmail, sieges, and murder just to hold on to power.
It is a lot to take in, and that is why we wanted to do this deep dive for you today. Because when you hear clean, polished doctrines, or you read a neatly printed creed today, it is so easy to forget the deeply messy, violent, and intensely human struggles that forged those words.
Yeah, they did not just fall out of the sky fully formed.
Exactly. And I think that leaves us with a really provocative final thought to mull over.
Yeah, think about this. If the foundational truths of a massive global religion were preserved not just by pious monks, but by political scheming, the stenciled signatures of barbarian kings, and the tactical assassinations of rival leaders, does that make the survival of those doctrines more of a divine miracle, or is it just a testament to the ruthless effectiveness of human ambition?
That is a fascinating question, and definitely something for you to explore on your own. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the history behind the ideas you take for granted, and we will catch you next time.